Hey guys, this is Andrew with rockclass101.com, and in this week's ukulele lesson, Matt's going to be teaching you how to play Free Fallin' by Tom Petty. Now this was quite an interesting arrangement for us because this is one that both him and I worked on. And we went back and forth over and over and over just trying different things out, trying to make this arrangement the best that it could be. And I really think it was well worth the effort because it came out awesome. What's neat about this arrangement is you get to work on the best of both worlds. You get to work on finger picking and strumming, plus you get to add a really cool percussive technique to the mix. Now, this percussive technique uses your thumb to add a backbeat to beats 2 and 4 throughout part of this arrangement. Now, if that's something that's new to you, I have a lesson that teaches it in complete detail, which I'll link right here and in the description box below. If you check out that lesson, it'll teach you how to do this technique with your thumb, but it goes a step further as well. It teaches you how to do this technique, but also play a melody note at the exact same time. So take a listen to this short little clip and you can see that both happening. You'll hear me playing just the tap by itself, but you also hear me playing a tap and a melody note simultaneously. So if you'd like to learn the mechanics behind doing that technique, I'll link it in the description box below. So let's talk a little bit about this lesson. In this video, Matt's going to teach you how to play the entire tune. But if you want to get the tabs to print off and follow along with, that's going to be available at this link right here. Or you can go to the site, rockclass101.com, do a search for Free Fallin'. Now also on that page will be the really cool interactive on-screen tab viewer. Now this is a great feature where you can hit play, you can watch the tabs scroll across in real time, you can highlight bars to loop sections, slow it down to any speed you wish, just a great asset in learning this tune that much easier. Alright, so without further ado, I'll hand it off to Matt to teach you how to play this. Don't forget to grab the high G ukulele, and I'll catch you at the end of the video.
Hello! In today's video we're going to learn a solo high G ukulele arrangement of Tom Petty's Free Fallin'. This is a lot of fun, pretty good challenge. Let's go ahead and dive in with the intro, bring the camera down. We're going to start here by playing some strumming with some of my favorite chords. We're going to start with an F add 9, just the index finger here on the first fret of the E string. We're going to do a down strum here. Then we're going to do a chunk. If you don't know how to chunk, there's a link right here that you can check out that breaks down the technique. But after we've done that chunk, we're going to come back up on this B flat 6 sus2. Sounds scary, but all that it is your index finger is going to collapse here and bar across the first fret of the E and the A strings, and you're going to come on an up strum with that. And that's all there is for that measure. We're going to do that down on the F add 9, chunk, and then the up on that B flat 6 sus2. So in time, that sounds something like this: 2 and 3 and 4 and. Going into the second measure, we're going to be still holding that same 0-1-1 chord, and we're going to do a down strum on that. Then we're going to come up back on the F add 9, so taking the index just going on the E string, do a chunk. Then we're going to play the C5 by taking your index finger here and sliding it up to the third fret of the E string, and we're going to do an up strum. Now we're going to try to not hit the A string if we can, but it's not a big deal if you do hit it. Just kind of directionalize the strum a bit so that you're more catching the interior strings. But again, not a big deal if that A rings through a bit. So in time, measure 2 sounds like this: 2 and 3 and 4 and. And then when we go on to measure 3, we're going to do the same thing we did as measure 1. In time, 2 and 3 and 4 and. As we go on to measure 4 now, we're going to start off the same way we did on measure 2. The same little chord progression with that sus chord into the F add 9 into the C5. But then at the very, very end of this measure, we're going to pluck the first fret on the E string with our index finger here and do a hammer on to the third fret on the E string with your ring finger. As far as what I use for my playing hand to play this, I'm going to switch to 4 finger picking. Thumb here on the G string, index here on the C string, middle here on the E string, and ring finger here on the A. And I'm going to be using this technique quite a bit as I go through from this point. So I'm plucking that 1 on the E with my middle finger, doing the hammer on to the 3rd fret with the ring finger. So measure 4 sounds like this in time. 2 and 3 and 4 and... And the whole intro now measures 1 through 4 in time, should sound something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... And from here we go on to the verse. During the verse, we're going to be using that 4 finger picking technique I just talked about at the end of the intro. We're going to start with my favorite chord, an F add 9, that same 0, 0, 1, 0 we played before. Pluck all 4 strings together. Then we're going to play a B flat sus2. This is funny enough, an easier name, but I think it's a little harder to play. All that you're going to do is take the middle finger, put it here on the 3rd fret of the G string. And we're going to pluck our G, C, and E together. And that's the whole measure. In time sounds like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... Going into the 6th measure now, we'll start working on these measures in pairs as we move forward here. We're going to pluck an F chord by taking this middle finger, moving it down to the 2nd fret of the G string, pluck those 3 together. Pluck the 1 on the E, which is already there. And then move to the C5 by sliding that index finger up to the 3rd fret, pluck the G, C, and E together. And open on the A, and open on the A again. So that you can hear it, here's now measures 5 and 6 in time. Should sound something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... Going on to the next pair of measures, we're going to go to 7 and 8. 7 starts off the same as 5, same F add 9, same B flat sus2. But then we're going to play the 1 on the E string at the very end of that measure. And then as we go into the 8th measure, we move back to our F chord. So that middle finger slides back down to the 2nd fret of the G. Pluck your G, C, and E together. Then the 1 on the E 2 more times. And then we're going to move up to the 3rd fret on the E string with that C5 by just sliding your index finger up. Pluck the G, C, and E together. Hold that for a moment. Then we're going to play the 1 on the E. Hammer onto the 3 on the E the same way we did at the end of the intro, that nice little 16th note. So that you can hear it, here's now measures 7 and 8 together as the pair. 2 and 3 and 4 and... As we go on from here, we go on to measures 9 and 10. Measure 9 is exactly the same as measure 5 was. That same F add 9, same B flat sus2. Exactly the same as we played it before. And then we're going to go on to measure 10. We're going to play the F chord. And we're going to play that same way that we've done on measure 6 as well as measure 8. Just the G, C, and E plucked. Then pluck the 1 on the E 2 more times. Slide up for that C5, pluck the G, C, and E strings together. Play the open on the A, and the open on the A again. These 2 measures, 9 and 10, they sound like this in time. 2 and 3 and 4 and... Going on to now 11 and 12. It's going to start off exactly the same as measure 7 did. So we're going to play that same F add 9, all 4. And then the 3 on the G for that B flat sus2. At the end of the measure, we're going to pluck that 1 on the E. Now in measure 12, it changes. We're going to go back to strumming. And we're going to play that 1 on the E string with this sort of F add 9 type chord. And we're going to try to not hit the A string if we can, because the melody's on the E string. But again, if you hit the A string, it's not a huge deal. We're going to do a down and up there. And then we're going to move to that C5, sliding the index up again. We're going to do another up strum. And so that measure 12, down, up, up. What can be really helpful with this is making sure that when you do that down, up, miss the strings going back down before you come up on the C5. It can help keep track of the sense of rhythm. And then at the very end of this measure, we're going to introduce a new technique. And this is actually the first time I've ever used this technique in a lesson. I'm pretty excited about it. I'm going to take my thumb. I'm just going to tap the side of the ukulele. I'm going to tap right around here. I'm going to do it right there so that I'm ready to go with finger picking, right? This is where I want my thumb to pick the G. So I'm going to tap the uke to kind of get it ready for when I want to pluck that G. I like to use the edge of my nail here to get that nice pop, but you can also just use more of the pad, whatever's comfortable, whatever sound you like. But at the very end of this measure, I'm just going to tap just like that. And that makes 11 and 12 sound something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... Pretty cool, right? So that is the verse. Let's go ahead and hear that verse 1 all the way through. This is measures 5 through 12. Should sound something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... Now from this point, we go on to a different section. We're going to be going on to a little break. This is going to make use of some of the things that we've played before, which is that little intro section, but it's also going to be using the tapping in between. It's kind of tricky, but what we're going to do with measures 13 and 14 is we're going to start with a down strum on the F add 9. And then instead of a chunk, we're just going to do that tap with our thumb. And then we're going to come up on the B flat 6 sus2, that 0 0 1 1 chord. We're going to do another tap with the thumb. And then we're going to do a down up, tap with the thumb. That's going to be on the 0 0 1 1 to the 0 0 1 0, just like we did before. With that tap instead of the chunk. Slide up to the 3 for that C6. Do a tap. And then we're going to pluck the 1 on the E and do the hammer onto the 3 on the E, just like we did at the end of measure 4, but this time we're using the tap instead of the chunk. So 13 and 14 are pretty much the same as 3 and 4, just using a tap instead of the chunk and adding 1 extra in there. It's kind of cool. It sounds something like this in time. 2 and 3 and 4 and... And going on from here, we go into verse 2. And this is where it really gets interesting because we're going to play the same type of stuff we did in verse 1. It's very similar. Same type of shape, same basic principle. But we're going to add this thumb tap on beats 2 and 4 of each measure to add this nice backbeat. Sounds really good, but it is a little challenging when you're first working on it. So to start here, measure 15, we're going to pluck the F add 9. Then we're going to do the tap with the thumb. Now remember, the thumb should tap right ready to go here because now I'm going to pluck the B flat sus2, the 3 0 1 on the G, C, and E right after that tap. Then I'm going to do another tap with my thumb. So this measure 15 is exactly the same as what we did on like measure, 5, just with that tap added. Always on beats 2 and 4. Going on from here, though, measure 16, we're going to then play the F chord again, pluck the 2, 0, and 1 on the G, C, and E, play the 1 on the E again, do a tap with the thumb, and then we're going to go to that C5, sliding the index finger up to the 3rd fret of the E, pluck the G, C, and E together, pluck the open A, thumb tap, open A again. This is tricky. It's kind of like juggling 2 parts. We're juggling the melody, the harmony, and now a rhythm along with it. But in time, measure 15 should sound something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... That took me extra time to practice when I was making this arrangement. There's something about the syncopation of plucking that C5 and then the open on the A followed by the tap followed by the open on the A. It's tricky. So just when you're working on it, it can be very beneficial to count it out as well as practice along with these videos to make sure you get it just right. As we move on though, we're going to move on to the next bars here, measures 17 and 18. Good news, they're almost the same. In fact, they're a little bit easier than bars 15 and 16 were. Starts with the same F add 9, same thumb tap, same B flat sus2, same thumb tap. So exactly the same as the previous thing on measure 15 where we played this. And then measure 18 here is looking a lot like measure 16, but it's just a little different. We're going to pluck the F, then the 1 on the E, the thumb tap, slide up to the C5 chord again, pluck that. And that's exactly the same as what we played before. Now instead of playing the open A and adding that syncopation that I mentioned makes it tricky, we're just going to hold that. We're going to do the click with our thumb, and then we're going to play 1 on the E and do the hammer on, just like we did at the very beginning of the intro going into the first verse, and we did in the break going into the second verse. So in time, measures 17 and 18 should sound something like this together. 2 and 3 and 4 and... Going on to measure 19, it's going to be exactly the same as measure 17 was and measure 15 was. Exactly the same as what we did. And then we're going to go on to measure 20 now. You'll notice it is exactly the same as what we did on measure 16. That's that tricky measure I mentioned earlier. We start with the F chord, pluck the G, C, and E together, the 1 on the E. We're going to tap the uke. And then we're going to slide that index up to 3 on the E string, pluck the G, C, and E together. And then we're going to pluck the A, do a tap, pluck the A again on that open. So 19 and 20 in time should sound something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... Go on to measure 21 and 22. Starts off the same. That's exactly the same as what we did on 19, 17, and 15, except the very last note of the measure, we're going to play that 1 on the E. So that makes it a little bit different. And then going into 22, we go away from this thumb tap and we go back into strumming. Now in 22, we're going to be playing that F add 9. We're going to go down, up, and then we can miss the strings going back down while we bring our index up for the C5, 0, 0, 3. Same thing that we played earlier in the tune on measure 12, if you remember. But then we're going way up the fretboard. We're going to a crazy cool strum section, and we're going to play this C sus4 at 0, 0, 8, 8. Bar your index finger across the 8th fret of the E and the A strings, just like this, and do a down-up strum. And that's the well, I'm of free Fallin, which we're going to get to in just a moment. But after you've done that, let's go and hear what 21 and 22 sound like in time. Should be something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... And now at this point, we are going into the chorus. But before we do that, let's go and hear what the verse second time through should sound like with that thumb tap. Should be something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... Now from here we go on to the chorus, and I think this is the coolest part of the tune. Tons of fun to play, but it is challenging going up the neck. After we've strummed that, we're going to leave our index where it is here, add the middle finger here on the 9th fret of the C string, and our pinky finger here on the 12th fret of the A string. Do a down strum over this F add 9 chord. Then we're going to do a chunk. And then we're going to come up on this different version of the B flat 6 sus2. Take your pinky finger off and slide your middle finger up 1 fret to 10 on the C string. So you have 0, 10, 8, 8. We're going to come up. And then it can be very helpful to do a miss and a miss going down and up so that you can help keep track of rhythm. For me, it's really helpful to keep the hand moving here. If I just kind of guess, I usually will rush things. So doing that miss down and that miss up helps keep track of the time before we do a chunk and then an up. And if we just look at that on measure 23, that can help us keep track of time, right? It goes 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and. If you don't need to do the misses, that's totally fine. It's just if you're struggling with the rhythm like I do when I was learning this type of stuff, this can be really helpful. Going into the 24th measure, we're still holding that same chord. We're going to do it down. Then we're going to come up, moving the middle finger down to 9. So we get this different version of the F add 9. Do a chunk. And then we're going to move our hand, index to the 7th fret of the C string, middle finger to the 8th fret of the E string, and pinky to the 10th fret of the A. Come up. That's a C5 chord. Sounds really nice. And then we're going to do that up. We can have another miss and a miss if we want. And then we're going to do a down strum, 0, 7, 8, 12. So we got to stretch that pinky out while holding that C5 shape to the fret 12 to hit that chord there, because the melody note is that A note. So here's what measures 23 and 24 sound like together. Should be something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and. Pretty cool, right? See how regular my hand's moving? That can really help to keep track of the rhythm. And then from here, we go on to the next measure, next two on measures 25 and 26. We're going to be playing that F add 9 again, but a different way this time. Instead of it being all the way, with the pinky, we are going to use our ring finger here on the 10th fret of the A string, alongside the middle finger on the 9th fret of the C string, and the index here on the 8th fret of the E string. Really important though to keep that index barred across the 8th fret of the E and the A, because after we play this first chord of 0, 9, 8, 10, we're then going to do another down strum without that ring finger there on 0, 9, 8, 8. So that gives us that sort of, at the end of the last bar, free, fall, in, all right? And then we're going to come up on that B flat 6 sus2. Man, big names. All that it is that middle finger sliding up to the 10th fret of the C string. Come up there. If you want to keep track of the rhythm, you can do a miss and a miss on the down and up. Then do a chunk. Come up on that chord again. Going right into 26, we're going to do a down still on this 0, 10, 8, 8 chord. Up on the 9 of the C, so slide that middle finger down. Chunk. And then this time we're going to play a C chord in a little different of way. Take your index, bar it across the 7th fret of the C, E, and A. Add the middle finger here on the 8th fret of the E string, so you have 0, 7, 8, 7. Do an up strum there after that chunk. And then we can do a miss, miss if we'd like. And then we're going to go with a 0, 7, 8, 8. Just collapse this middle finger to be on the 8th fret of the A string. Do a down and up. And that's the well, I'm to go back into the beginning for free of Free Fallin', right? So here's what measures 25 and 26 sound like in time. Should be something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and. And at this point, it actually repeats and goes back to measure 23 and goes through 23, 24, 25, and 26. And so let's go ahead and hear what that sounds like, and then we'll set up that measure 27. So here's 23, 24, 25, 26, so you can start to hear the groove with that repeat. It should sound something like this. Repeat. And now at this point, it, instead of going to measure 26, goes on to measure 27. And here's what's cool. Measure 27 is like an easier version of 26. You do the same down on this chord, same up on the next chord that you did, just the same, do the same chunk, come up on that same C chord, 0, 7, 8, 7, and then you just hold it. And that's all there is to that measure 27. It doesn't play the well-I'm at the end of it. And so 27 in time sounds something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... And that finishes this chorus section. Now I'm going to play the whole chorus with the repeat, and we're given extra time to this because rhythm is hard. Strumming is really hard. It was something that I struggled with a lot when I was learning. And what I want you to watch is if rhythm is tricky for you too, pay extra close attention to my hand movements and notice how regular it's moving. I'm always going down and up the whole time with this and never breaking that pattern. If you're not someone who struggles with rhythm, it's totally fine to play this by feel. Go for it. But if you're like me, pay extra close attention to the movement of the hand because that's the trick to getting it consistent. Play it nice and slow, consistent movement. But here's what the chorus sounds like with the repeat. This is measures 23 all the way through measures 27 with that repeat in there. Should sound something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... And now at this point, we go to the outro. I love this outro. It's so simple. It's exactly the same as the intro. We're going to play the exact same part, nothing different except at the very end, instead of playing that little hammer on, right? We don't do that. Otherwise, it's exactly the same. These 4 bars are just going with the F add 9, down strum, chunk up on the B flat 6 sus2. And then we're going to do for measure 29, the down, up, chunk up on that B flat 6 sus2, F add 9, chunk up on the C5, just like we did at the intro. No difference whatsoever. And measure 30 is exactly the same as 28. And 31 is exactly the same as 29. So that is exactly identical to what we played at the beginning, only a little bit easier yet because we don't add those extra notes at the very end. So the outro, measures 29 through 31, or excuse me, 28 through 31, should sound like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... Pretty cool, right? One other tip with this is to keep that hand moving, right? I've said this a few times with this video. You can do this with the outro as well. Keeping that hand moving can be so helpful if you struggle with rhythm like I did when I'm learning all sorts of different rhythms like this. Keeping the hand moving was the trick for me to get consistent. Bring the camera back up. This is a fantastic arrangement that's pretty difficult, but uses a lot of different techniques and layers. Stay patient with it when you're learning it. Don't expect to get the whole thing in one go, and you'll have it as long as you work on it very carefully and considerately as you work through each of these individual movements. So, as always, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you on another lesson here on Rock Class 101. See ya.
Alright guys, so this week's ukulele lesson was a lot of fun. This is one of those tunes that as soon as you hear it, you can't help but start singing along. And I just got to give props to Matt too, because he did an amazing job performing it, and it was an absolute pleasure to work on this arrangement with him. Now, I do want to give you a friendly reminder. If you do want to get the tabs to print off and keep for your records, that was available at this link right here, or you can go to the site rockclass101.com, do a search for Free Fallin. Now also on that page was the really cool interactive on-screen tab viewer, so you can literally hit play, you can watch that tab scroll across in real time, highlight bars, loop sections, slow it down, all that fun jazz. So guys, again, I hope you enjoyed learning this tune, and we'll catch you in the next lesson. Take care.